The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It is Tuesday and it's a very exciting day today. We've been promising you for a while, but today is the day that we are going to show you the interview that we taped with Temple Grandin last week where she answered 34 of your questions. You guys wrote in overwhelmingly. Now I know there were probably 1,000 questions, but we tried to consolidate some of them to get the most bang for our buck, right? Our time with Temple Grandin. So I'm going to refrain from going off on tangents. You know I go off on tangents, and I want to talk about yesterday here with the soup Nazi and so many other things, but I'm not going to do it because there's nothing that I could say that could come anywhere close to what Temple Grandin has to say, right? And I get that. So I'm just going to tell you that there are lots of different ways that you can interact with us here. Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can watch our program and that you can write into us. I'm going to remind you that there's only one way to watch live. That's www.autism-live.com. We left the live feature live overnight last night, and a lot of you wrote in during the night. So I think I'm going to try that out for the week and see, so that we're just going to leave it live all the time. You can write in questions and then we'll answer them during the live show. See how that works out for you. And of course, you can write in questions while we're showing the video of Temple speaking, but if we aren't having her live this morning. We taped it last week, but we will be talking to her again in about a month, so we'll keep those questions. So if you have questions that come up for Temple while you're watching, go ahead, send them in, and I'll just put them in a file when we talk to her next. But we appreciate your comments and suggestions and questions. They always add to what's happening here. We're going to start off right now with our jargon of the day, because that's how we like to start the day. You see, I'm just going to get right to it today. And our jargon today is a preference assessment. This is a really important term that we all want to be familiar with. We talked a little bit yesterday about what a reinforcer is and how important it is to have a reinforcer. In fact, one of the questions that came in over the night was about how do you get a child to do something that they don't want to do, that they're procrastinating, they say it's too hard, they use excuses to get out of it, right? And we see that kind of behavior happen all the time. Very important to know why it's happening, but almost always we want to make sure that the reinforcer is enough of a reinforcer to get them to do the hard job. How do we figure that out? We do a preference assessment. So let's look at what our actual definition is. A preference assessment, a procedure to determine the stimuli that a person prefers, the relative preference of those stimuli, and their personal value as potential reinforcers. All right, let's take it down a notch for our working definition. It is checking to see what might be most rewarding or reinforcing for someone. Now, depending on a person's skill level, depending upon their age, and depending upon their ability to communicate, we're going to do this in different ways, right? If you wanted to do a preference assessment for me, you might ask me, Shannon, what is it you want? I want you to do this thing. What would make it worthwhile for you to do it, right? And in the corporate world, there are times people do a survey. Now, do people always know what's actually reinforcing to them? Not always, but it's a good place to start to ask what the preference assessment is. But once you've asked them and then you see, did it work? If it didn't, you got to go back in and try something else. So you have to sort of keep tabs on it, keep data on it. So if you've got a teenager in your life and you ask them and you say, okay, I want to see if you can keep your room clean for a week. What would make it worthwhile to you, right? How about if what are you saving for? Oh, they're saving for this and so video game. All right. For every day that you make your bed, and you got to be really clear what the criteria is, what if I were to give you $5 towards your video game for every day for a week? That's a little exorbitant because it's going to cost you a lot of money by the end of the week, right? But if you're trying to get that behavior, you might want to start with a big reward. So if this teenager, you see that they get up and they make their bed, then you go, hey, $5 worked, right? But you ask the teenager might come back and say, it's not going to be rewarding enough. I want $5 and I don't want to be able to sleep late on Saturday. Or you get into a negotiation with a teenager, right? For a baby, we can still do a preference assessment for a baby that has no spoken language and minimal communication skills. We put 3 toys out in front of them and we see which one they gravitate towards, right? Which one catches their eye, which one they start to belly crawl towards. That's still a preference assessment. We need to do preference assessments on such a regular basis that I can guarantee you that none of us is doing it enough. And it's really a good thing to do on a regular basis because it ensures that you're working in a positive direction towards progress. The preference assessment is not the be-all, end-all, right? Because as I said, sometimes you see that, okay, they said they wanted that, but really that wasn't enough to make the behavior happen more often. But it's a great place to start. It doesn't hurt to ask. What would it take for you to be able to do this? And we ask it in lots of different ways. You can be that simple about it. You can be sneaky about it, or you can set 3 things out and see which one they want to take. Stores do this all the time with us, right? We don't even know they're doing it. They put 3 things out and they see which one people pick up and touch. The preference assessment. Very, very important that we do this as often as possible because as we mentioned yesterday, what you want in the morning is different than what you want at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is different than what you want at 11:30 at night. The same is true for everyone. So you need to figure it out. What do they want right now? And you do the preference assessment as often as possible. You really can't do it too much. Okay, we always have a question of the day for you. We want to get you interacting with us on Facebook and other ways. You can tweet into us. You can email into us, whatever works best for you. But I especially love it when you do it on Facebook because then you get to see each other's answers. And that's a really beneficial thing. You learn all kinds of things. So our question of the day today is, what is the biggest obstacle preventing your family from having more fun? Now, if you're like me, somebody asked me this question and the first thing that pops up in my head, I go, money. Because if we had all the money in the world, we could, and then I go, wait a second. Really? Yeah, if we had more money, we could go do, right, make the list. But is that really what's preventing us from having more fun? And then my next thing is I'm tired all the time, right, which is an entirely different statement than money, right? And is it really that I'm too tired? Because part of the reason why I'm too tired is I'm staying up too late. And then my next question is that probably it's that we're spending too much time in devices. If I'm going to be honest, and you know I like to keep it real around here, I might be watching too much television, like me watching House of Cards all last week on Netflix, which was very good, by the way. But I could have been having more fun with my family and checking my email compulsively and my child wanting to be in his video game all the time. And then I think to myself, well, then maybe we could be having more fun all playing something together. So I'm very interested to see what you guys write, but let's talk about what's really preventing us from having more fun. Because I know some people who just have oods and scads of money, and I don't think they're having more fun than the rest of us, to be honest. I know. It seems a shame, doesn't it? But in any case, write in and tell us on Facebook. Now, we always have a topic of the week, and as mentioned yesterday, our topic this entire week is family fun. Trying to figure out how we get down to brass tacks and enjoy ourselves. Be in the moment. And that's really the beginning of all of it, right? It doesn't take more money. When you think about the most fun your family has ever had, sometimes it's just being together and being in the moment and accepting everybody and being where you are, right? When I think about when I was a kid and the most fun that we had, and it usually was when we were in the car driving someplace, but not always, but it never involved a huge amount of money. So keep that in mind. We're talking about family fun and we're keeping it as low cost as possible because we know that's that's an issue, right? And some of the different things that we have going on this morning, it's a very exciting morning here. We're taking time with Temple. So in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be airing that segment that we taped over a week ago. She's going to answer more than 34 of your questions. And then, of course, you're going to see the A word. And then when we come back from the A word, we might have one brief segment, and then we're going to have Evelyn Gould, BCBA, and you guys wrote in some questions during the night that we're going to be asking Evelyn, and we'll take more questions. You can keep them coming in. I'm just checking to see. Yes, Temple Grandin, if you're watching us, make sure that you hit the play button. We're about to show it in just a second. So keep in mind, keep your questions coming during the show, but it is a taped segment, so we won't be able to ask any new questions this time. But if you're watching and you want to ask a question, we'll save it for the next time that we have an opportunity to talk with Temple. So take a look. She's amazing. I know you're going to love what she has to say. This is Temple Grandin. Welcome to Autism Live. We have a very special guest on the phone this morning. As promised, we have Temple Grandin on the phone with us. First of all, Temple, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. I understand that you had a great deal of snow this morning.
Oh, we had a horrible amount of snow last night. I gave a talk over in Greeley at the educational college, and the roads were just horrible coming back home.
Wow. It's not supposed to happen at this time of the month in April, is it? In the beginning of April, maybe, but craziness. Well, Temple, we have so many questions for you. It's kind of overwhelming. We put out a call to parents asking if there was anything that they wanted to ask you and individuals who are on the spectrum. And we have so many questions. There's no way that we're going to get through all of them, but I want to get to as many as possible. So if it's okay with you.
Why don't you try to pick out the questions where people may have had the same question, from several different people.
And I've tried to do that in a couple of different things. Starting with the first question is, what was the most difficult thing that you've had to overcome during your teenage years, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, teasing and bullying was absolutely the worst. And the only place where I was not teased and bullied was when I was horseback riding or doing Model Rocket Club or doing electronics lab. Those specialized interests were refuges away from teasing. Now, one of the problems we have today is today, if I had been out riding, they would have been texting me all kinds of horrible stuff like tape recorder and workhorse. Those were some of the names that they called me. Teasing was the worst possible thing. I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting these kids involved with shared interests, like electronics, school play, band, because those can be refuges from teasing.
Okay, absolutely wonderful question. This is a great question that came in from a viewer. What do autistic people pay attention to when they are communicating with other people?
Well, when I was young, I didn't even know about all the little subtle eye signals. I didn't even know they existed until I read about them in a book when I was 50 years old. And that's sort of like not knowing the language. Now, today, there's so many educational materials that can teach people those things.
Absolutely. But for younger kids, when you were younger and you didn't know about those things, what kinds of things did you pay attention to?
Well, I knew if somebody was laughing out loud or if somebody was mad. I certainly understood that. It was the subtle things that I did not understand.
Yeah. Interesting. Was there something, though, were you somebody who looked at people's faces, or did you just listen to the tone of their voice before you knew about those subtle things?
Well, the only subtle sign that I picked up was tone of voice. Okay. And when I was getting my business started, I would sometimes call up clients, and if they had a little whine in their voice, then I knew that maybe they weren't happy with me. And that's a subtle signal that animals pick up. If you went up to your dog and you went, "You're a horrible dog," and you said it like that, he'd wag his tail.
Yes.
Because he's going to be cueing into the tone of voice.
Right. Very fascinating. Okay, so tone of voice then is probably really important, especially when you're working with younger kids.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. All right, a little bit more specific question here. My 5-year-old is high-functioning autistic. When he gets agitated, for example, his sister takes his toy, he thumps himself in his head and his face. What can I do to make him use his words? And they wrote, P.S., your life story was an awakening for me. I understood my boy so much more, so thank you.
Well, that's really good. I'm glad that they understood him better. One of the things we've got to do is teach kids about turn taking, because I was reading some research where some of the executive function problems can be improved with the kid has to learn how to inhibit a response. Mm-hmm. And I was taught turn taking with the Parcheesi board. Also, I had to learn that you've got to give those dice a fair shake. And I was always encouraged to speak. But I think working on activities where he has to inhibit a response will help on this.
Absolutely. I think
board games are absolutely great.
I'm a fan of board games, too. We taught my son so many different life skills using board games, and it was very reinforcing.
They really helped me.
Well, and Parcheesi was your favorite one?
Well, you see, right after the war, when I was 2.5 years old, the children's board games just did not exist.
Oh.
And so the checkers was too hard, and so my mother got the two easiest grown-up games, and they were Parcheesi and Chinese checkers that you play with the marbles.
Right.
And the Parcheesi board was the main board game that was used with me when I was very, very young.
Wow. Do you still play board games, Temple?
No, I don't now, but I really recommend them for little kids. The other thing is, back in the 50s, things that were really fun you had to do with other kids. Because when I was a little older, I got a table hockey set, and that was my favorite thing. But you have to play that with somebody else.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because a lot of games now, kids get to isolate with computer games and things and be by themselves. Even if they're chatting with somebody else, they're very isolated while they're doing it.
Well, I think we've got to be doing more activities involving turn-taking and playing with other kids in the real world. Now, something like a Wii. Okay, if you do tennis doubles on the Wii,
yes,
that is doing something. So I'm not anti-technology.
Right.
So let's do things where the kids have to interact in real life. It could be with an electronic game. You can get electronic Scrabble now. You can play that, with two kids playing it on a phone.
Yes.
But I want the kids interacting in the real world together. They have got to learn those social skills.
Absolutely.
And if you use an electronic device, fine. But I want them taking turns with that thing that's on the phone.
Okay, great. Interesting that you brought up technology, because our next question was about getting equipment and technology and finding funding for it. And they wanted to know if you're aware of any grants or insurance that would help to cover that. We're looking for an iPad, since it has apps that can help with speech issues and task management.
Well, one of the things now is old iPads can probably be bought very, very cheaply on eBay. The iPad 1 is going to work just fine. Now, I know the Go is kind of pricey, but I think if you look around, you can find other apps that are free.
Yes.
Also, for older kids and high-functioning kids, there's fabulous free college courses online.
Yes.
Things like Coursera, edX, and Udacity, and Khan Academy.
Absolutely. You gave me some great advice about that for my son. We actually wrote a blog about it on our site, listing all those things that you had told me for my son. If people are interested, they can go to our blog to find that.
How many hits did you get on that stuff?
You know what? That's a really good question, and I'll have to look that up for you, because I don't know off the top of my head. But I will find that out and let you know, Temple, because it was really good information. Yes, because it's
okay. Let's do some more questions.
Yes, absolutely. We had a lot of questions about sensory issues. One in particular, my 9-year-old has a lot of sensory issues that cause her to flap her hands and jump up and down when she's excited. Is there a way we can help her to control these overstimulations?
Well, I think working with an OT, there's a number of different sensory activities that can help reduce this, things like deep pressure, slow swinging. Another thing that helps is just heavy work. I think one of the reasons why I liked cleaning the horse stalls so much when I was 15 is that the heavy work helped to calm down my nerves.
Interesting.
And lots of exercise also helps. Other things, fish oil supplements. I've been taking some B6 and magnesium that I just buy over at Whole Foods, and that's been helpful for me. I get the Blue Bonnet B100s. let's get 10 tons of sugar out of the diet.
Yeah.
And I found myself, I've got to have some animal protein in the morning. Otherwise, I just cannot function.
Interesting.
But work with a good OT that's trained in sensory activities. Also, what was done with me, I was allowed to have an hour after lunch where I could just veg out and spin things. But then there were other places where it was not allowed, like the dinner table or in the classroom. But some of these kids need to have sensory breaks where they can do a calming activity. And one of the reasons some kids do these behaviors is that they are calming.
Yeah.
But the problem, you let the kid do it all day, his mind's not going to develop.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's super duper advice. You had talked the last time we talked with you about limiting the amount of time that they could stim, and we've had several parents write in and said they've said how effective that has been working with their kids. Good. Very good, good advice.
We limit it. We don't eliminate it. We limit it.
Absolutely. Super advice. Somebody wants to know, what are your thoughts on yellow street signs similar to those for deaf or blind people for neighborhoods with autistic children? I'm battling with my city trying to get one. They say they're only available for people with physical disabilities or sensory issues. I say to them that autism can be both, but they won't listen.
What kind of signs they're trying to get? I don't understand.
They want to put up like a yellow sign like you would put up for a deaf child or for a blind child, notifying people in the neighborhood that they need to use caution and slow down. And she wants to know what you think about that to label. We had one in our neighborhood that said deaf child area so that people were just a little bit more aware. She's wanting to put up one that says autistic child, and she wants to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, you could just get your own sign and put it up.
That's true. That's true. But do you think there's anything negative in terms of doing that and notifying people in the neighborhood?
One of the problems is I think drivers might get confused because they're going to know what a deaf child is.
Yeah.
But, you're not sure what an autistic child's going to do. See, sometimes they get so much in their own world that they act like they're deaf.
Yeah.
They're not aware of what's going on around them.
And so maybe if the concern is that the child elopes, maybe they need to put up a deaf child sign. I think what she's concerned about is safety.
Just put up a sign, something. I know that a lot of people don't like the word handicapped, but I'm looking at drivers.
Yes.
Going down a street
for them to understand.
I think they're going to react better to a sign that said handicapped child caution than autistic child, because they're not going to know how to react to that.
Okay.
Because you don't know who's driving down that street.
Great. And speaking of driving, our next question is about driving. What challenges did you face when you first learned to drive? My son is 16, has Asperger's, and doesn't want to drive, but will if pushed to. He's a very good driver with a few exceptions that make me too nervous to let him go out on the road alone. Just wondering how you felt and how you handled this experience.
Well, I spent a year on easy roads before I did any freeways or did any traffic.
Okay.
You've got to get the driving, in other words, braking, steering, and gas, so practiced that it becomes like autopilot, where you don't have to think about that. And then ease into, more difficult traffic. And that deals with the multitasking problem. He needs to just get hours and hours and hours behind the wheel, parking, driving in totally safe places, like a big supermarket parking lot, a little road in a suburban cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Practice. Because what was done with me was out on my aunt's ranch. The mailbox was 3 miles away, and 6 days a week, I drove the car up to the mailbox on a dirt road. Actually, it was a pickup truck with 3 on the column with a really awful balky clutch. So that was 6 miles of driving I did a day with my aunt sitting right beside me for an entire summer. And that's a lot of practice. He's got to just get in the hours of practice.
Okay.
And then you go on an easy suburban street where, you got to do a few lights, there's just a few other cars, and you gradually work into more difficult situations.
Okay. Were you excited to get behind the wheel, though, or were you a little bit reluctant in the beginning?
I was reluctant. My aunt just said to me, we're going to start to learn how to drive.
Okay.
And the very first day, she didn't make me deal with the clutch. And so I sat beside her, and I steered the truck.
Okay.
And as soon as I got used to steering, then she got me in the truck, and I had to deal with the clutch, and the truck lurched forward. But we were in a dirt driveway where there was nothing to hit.
Okay.
And I had to learn how to work that clutch. But I was doing this all out on dirt roads where there was just hardly any other cars around.
Right. Right. Fascinating. Okay, good Good to know. Next question is about a 10-year-old who protests for every single task, wants to really do nothing. What strategy do you suggest, Temple?
When you say wants to do nothing,
yeah.
But what are some of the tasks he's being asked to do?
Well, and she doesn't go into any further detail on that, but we do have a couple of other questions that have to do with this too, of children who just really want to sit and veg, that they're, being asked to get dressed, asked to go to school, asked to go outside and play, asked to engage in activity, and it's not even that they're wanting to play video games, they just want to veg. And
well, some of this is really, really high anxiety.
Okay.
Because I can remember one time getting into big panic attacks and wanting to just stay in my room and not do anything. My mother would just come and get me out.
Okay.
There was one thing, they weren't going to let me be a recluse in my room.
Yeah.
Just wasn't going to be allowed. And when I was at the boarding school and I was not doing very much studying, I was doing a lot of horse stall cleaning. But the place where they drew a line in the sand is I was not allowed to just stay in my room. I had to show up at meals. I had to show up at chapel. I had to go to movie night. And I didn't want to do movie night because I was nervous, so they made me projectionist.
Oh, great idea. That's wonderful. And so, Temple, what were there consequences if you didn't do it, or were there incentives for doing it?
Well, if I had just was going to totally stay in my room and not get dressed for church, there would have been consequences.
Okay.
And probably rather severe ones.
And what did they offer you, the incentive that you could do the spinning with the plate on your bed if you did do it?
No, they didn't do anything like that.
Okay.
I don't think you got to remember. I just never got to that point because there were expectations.
Okay.
That I had to come down to meals.
Yes.
And I can remember twice in my life getting spanked, and there was always that threat.
Okay.
And I also would get television taken away from me.
Okay.
And I wanted to watch the Howdy Doody show. And if I threw tantrums and things like that, there'd be no Howdy Doody show for one night.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty big consequence. All right. Somebody wants to know, what did you need from school that you did not get?
Well, actually, I had a good elementary school education. Where I got into problems at school was in high school. I just wasn't interested in teenage girls. They're no longer interested in doing projects, and I still wanted to do projects. High school, large girls' school was a disaster. I got thrown out for fighting because kids teased me. And that was some of the worst parts of my life. We need to develop the areas of strength. Like my ability in art was always encouraged, and that became the basis of my career.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. Lovely compliments that people sent you. Somebody said, Temple, hello, you are an inspiration, intelligent, and caring woman. Thank you for your contributions to the world of autism. I have to ask you about the movie part with your mother. You and your mother are on the stairs. She has flashcards. She is slowly pronouncing C-A-T, cat. Ka-at.
Og. Da. Og. Temple. Dog. Temple. Cat. At. Cat. Temple. Trop. Mom. Me.
Exactly what my speech teacher did.
Okay.
She slowed down and she enunciated the words. And I can remember her holding up a cup. She tended to use objects more than flashcards. And she'd hold up a cup and she'd say, now say cup, cup, pa. And she'd slow down and enunciate the hard consonant sounds so I could hear them.
Yeah.
Because when the grown-ups talked really fast, it sounded like gibberish. In fact, I thought grown-ups had their own special language.
Interesting. We've heard many autistic adults saying that when the words came in, they sounded like something completely different, and they seemed to go fast. So that's very interesting. And she wanted to know if you think that type of work with a toddler is important if they're on the autism spectrum.
You mean would work with flashcards or work
going that slow, one-on-one, and going that slow, that skill building.
I think autistic toddlers need lots and lots of one-on-one, and that's supported by all the research on applied behavior analysis, or ABA. These kids need 20 or 30 hours a week of one-on-one teaching with an effective teacher that just kind of knows how hard to push the child. You know, you push them too hard, they have a meltdown. You don't push them enough, they don't advance. But some kids you have to slow down a whole lot, maybe others you do not. You know, that's going to be very, very variable.
Okay.
My speech teacher would say, now say cup, and then she'd go cup, pa. Okay, say cup. Okay, now cup, pa. She'd go back and forth between saying it regular and saying it very, very slowly.
Okay, good advice. All right, so we had a lot of questions about difficulties with getting kids to do homework, and I picked one in particular. She writes, my autistic daughter is 9 years old and has meltdowns when it comes to doing homework, especially when it comes to putting pencil to paper, knowing she knows it in her head. At times she can rattle off the answers orally, and other times when it's the easiest of answers like 2 + 2 = 4, she says it's too hard. She cannot focus on the task. I give her little breaks and don't pressure her, but a sheet of homework can last for hours, and a lot of screaming, stomping, crying, biting, punching, throwing things, etc. in between. How do I make this a much simpler task for both of us? She's been getting ABA therapy from school, but they're not seeing a difference with what's happening at school.
Well, first of all, I've got to try to figure out what's going on here, whether there's some kind of sensory problem with the writing instrument. See, this is the kind of thing where I've got to get a lot more information about why she's throwing these fits. I've got to make sure that maybe she has a problem with fluorescent lights, you know, in the place where she has to do the homework. Because this is sounding, it's so severe, it's sounding like a sensory issue. My problem with doing homework is I just was not interested. It was not a sensory reason. And I only knuckled down and started studying in high school when I had the goal of becoming a scientist. See, that's a different thing. And maybe a child that's got some kind of sensory issue doesn't like touching the paper or something. You know, maybe we should do her homework on a computer. You know, I don't know. I'd have to ask a lot more questions. So,
but the potential to change the variables up, because it also strikes me that she mentions that she can, a lot of the times she can do the question in her head, but when it comes to the easiest of answers, that she says it's too hard. And I know it's, you just were mentioning that sometimes it wasn't interesting to you. It was boring.
Well, that's one thing, but the other thing is you can have a kid that's echolele. In other words, they yak out all these TV commercials, but they don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
You see, what might be happening, and I'm just saying, I want to emphasize, might be happening,
right,
is that the circuit in the brain for doing this with auditory is working, but maybe her vision, maybe she's got visual processing problems. And she's seeing kind of broken up stuff, and she doesn't see the paper right. And in my book, The Way I See It, I've got 2 chapters in there where I address visual processing problems. Yeah. Maybe the print's jiggling on the page, you know, and so in other words, she might be an auditory learner, and maybe that's the way we need to approach things.
Okay, interesting. So lots of different variables. And you mentioned your book. You've got a new book that's coming out. Do you want to tell us really quickly what the new book is?
Well, the new book is going to be called The Autistic Brain. It's going to be released on April 30th. And I worked with a really great co-author, Richard Panik, a super, super science writer. The first chapter reviews the history of the diagnostic criteria. Lovely. And I have to say it was rather shocking seeing the whole history just laid out side by side, see how much they changed the diagnosis. Then the next chapter, we go into genetics research, and it's complicated genetics research. We have a whole chapter in sensory in there. I think a lot of people are going to find helpful. I have a chapter on the different kinds of minds, visual thinking mind, the mathematics mind, word minds, and then a chapter on all my brain scans that have been done on me, and there's pictures of all the brain scans, and then a final chapter on jobs for the different kinds of minds and getting people prepared for careers.
Lovely. Well, I can't wait to read this. And we actually have a bunch of questions about jobs that I'm going to get to before we get done. Really interesting question that caught my attention, wondering what you think about it. Somebody wrote in and said, my daughter talks to her hands as if they were puppets. She refers to her left hand as the bad hand and her right hand as the good hand. She sometimes puts things in between her fingers of her left hand as if they were eating something or putting things on top of it as a hat. She has different voice voices for each of them. She calls the left hand Jessie, named for a classmate of hers, and the right hand her name. Sometimes the hands smack each other. Could this be something that is going on at school that she's having a hard time telling us? My daughter does talk, but she has a hard time expressing how she is feeling and gets frustrated when I ask.
Well, she may be just trying to act out with her hands.
Yeah.
Literally just using them as puppets. And I don't know how old this child is or what exactly the level of functioning is. But one of the things I've observed in autism is you can have, like in my own case, for example, my visual thinking works really well, but my algebra department is broken. There's a tendency to be uneven skills. And she may be, talking, maybe things aren't hooked up all that well, but she's just trying to act it out with her hands because that's how she's trying to communicate.
Absolutely. We had a lot of questions from parents whose children don't speak and wanting your help. One in particular, my son is 10 and is totally nonverbal but very bright. He's the only student in his class that sight reads, and he spells quite well, no tantrums, very affectionate, great eye contact, and very gentle but totally nonverbal. His developmental neurologist says he has a great constitution and could start talking soon. Is there anything I can do to help him start speaking? He does flap his hands and lines up his toys, but otherwise seems to be really far ahead of his other classmates.
Well, what I'm wondering is maybe he needs to just start typing.
Yeah.
Like give him a laptop or even better yet, give him an iPad. And the reason why that works better is because when you type on the virtual keyboard, the print appears right next to the keyboard. Because some individuals that are nonverbal can't attention shift from print appearing on the top of the laptop screen and then have to look down at the keyboard. And that's why sometimes laptops don't work.
Okay.
iPads do. I would just introduce this kid to typing.
Okay.
Because I think he might become totally fluent typing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice.
I would definitely try that, and I would probably start with an iPad because that solves the attention shifting problem.
Love that. So many people wanted to know about telling their child that they have autism and when you knew that you were autistic, and if you have suggestions about how and when to tell someone that they're on the spectrum.
Well, if a kid can read, I mean, I have the book, Cy Montgomery book, Temple Grandin by Cy Montgomery, which is a really nice little book. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of children's books out. There's Little Rain Man by Karen Simmons. But the thing I'm seeing is I'm seeing too many kids on the high end of the spectrum getting hung up on their autism. Mm-hmm. All they want to talk about is their autism rather than about their science project, or they like, rocket ships, or they like dogs, or they like to do their math homework. I'd rather see them get hung up on something else.
Yeah.
Autism is an important part of who I am, but my other activities is my primary identity. And now for older individuals, when they're having dating problems and marital relations problems, this is where diagnosis is really helpful. Yeah. And I discussed this in my book, Different Not Less, where 14 people on the spectrum get diagnosed in the 50s and 60s, and that diagnosis really helped with their relationships. Yeah. And all the people in that book had jobs all their life. But I'm seeing too many smart kids getting so hung up on autism that they're not learning how to work. And I think this is a really serious problem. Yeah. And when I was 13 years old, I had a mother arranged a little job for me selling clothes for seamstress. When I was 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. When I was 16, I was doing carpentry work, shingling the barn roof, painting signs for our school events. Mm-hmm. I had lots of work experience.
Absolutely. How old were you when you first knew the word autism?
Probably end of elementary school.
Okay. And was it your mom who talked to you about it?
Yes.
And how did she explain it to you, Temple?
Well, you see, this is the thing. You got to remember the era that I live in. Yeah. And there was no autism materials. There's no books or nothing that she could explain to me. Just explained that my brain was kind of different. And none of the materials that are available now were available. There were no support groups.
Yeah, but But in a way, you know, I mean, we all look at you and you've done so well. And clearly she explained it to you so that it was something that was different. And of course, we know that it was important for your mom to know that you were different, but equal, not less. Different, but not less, as you've said.
The other thing that was done with me is things I was good at was encouraged, but I wasn't praised for every little tiny thing that I did. You know, when I was around 3rd or 4th grade, I made a beautiful clay horse, and that was praised.
Yeah.
And when I did a very nice watercolor of a beach, that was put in a professional frame and hung on the wall with the professional pictures. But every little piece of art I brought home, you know, crummy little thing I brought home from school, I can remember an ashtray I made in the 1st grade. It was, I know it's politically incorrect now to make ashtrays, but that was a 1st grade project.
Yes.
It's probably not worthy of praise. But when I did something really good, then she really praised it.
Okay. So you knew when you did something well because she saved the praise for that.
She saved the praise for the really good stuff.
Okay. You brought up the whole idea of romance and relationships, and we had a lot of people writing in for advice about that. One mom in particular who said, my son is 17 and I would like to know... Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's another one. How can I help my 20-year-old son with autism meet a girl or at least a companion? There is no hurry, of course, as he is anxious and afraid to deal with such an issue. He already works, drives, and manages his bank account, helps pay his bills, etc. There are times that he would like to have someone his own age to go to movies with and or travel with. And we had lots of people who wrote in, Temple, and said, how do we help our teenagers and our young adults to meet people with like interests for the potential for romance?
Well, I think we've got to get involved with the shared interests. I mean, you know, I know a lady named Jennifer Myers, and she's got a very nice book on learning life skills. And Jennifer met her husband at a science fiction convention. That's an example of shared interests.
Yeah.
They're both computer people. Or they met each other at a historical reenactment society. Get involved with events where you get these intense shared interests.
Yeah.
And that's where you can find a soulmate. You know, most of my friends are involved with autism, animal behavior, or, you know, scientific stuff.
And so you have your core group of friends shared interests.
That's right. So get your son involved with, you know, first thing I'd ask that mom is, what's your son interested in?
Yeah.
What's your son doing at work? Does he really like his work? You know, obviously if his work was janitor work, I don't think you want to have shared interests in that.
Right.
But let's say he worked for a computer company or he worked for, you know, something else, something a bit more interesting. There might be a shared interest there.
Okay.
But that's where things are going to be the best. It could be an art group. It could be a drama group. It could be a choir, a church choir. It could be all. So then maybe you do other singing things together.
Okay, great. And would you say that because we also had people with younger kids writing in saying, how do I work on friendships without the romance? So would the same thing apply to the younger kids as well? Okay.
Same thing. Shared interests. And the other thing we've got to work on is the turn taking.
Yeah.
And the kid not totally monopolizing the conversation. You know, like there's kind of a good rule of, you know, I got fixated on things like carnival rides. Well, okay, I only tell that story twice, you know, because I go on and on about that and just drive people completely crazy. It's the same thing, shared interests.
Okay, wonderful. Somebody wrote in, you were talking about algebra just a second ago. They were wanting to know, they had heard you talking and saying that there was one type of math that was particularly difficult, if not impossible, for people with autism. Other people wrote in and said that wasn't quite exactly right, that you mentioned that you're not good with algebra, but they want to know, would that be true of all people with autism? And it seems like a lot of our viewers were concerned about math problems that are considered word problems, that their children are having difficulty with those.
Problems. I have a problem with word problems because you've got to like sequence information, and I just don't get a lot of the word problems. And when it comes to things like algebra, it was horrible for me as a visual thinker. But there's other kids on the autism spectrum, they do algebra just fine.
Yeah.
So it's very variable.
Okay.
The pattern I tend to see, and I have a whole chapter on this in the Autistic Brain book, is I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. I can visualize things photorealistically in my head. I have trouble with algebra. Then you have another kind of kid. He's a math genius. He's good at everything in math, but may have trouble with reading. And then you got a kid that's a word kid. and he'll know everything about his favorite movies or about, cars or whatever his interest is. Math skills, just average, not a visual thinker. And then you've got others that are an auditory learner, and they learn everything through their ears, and they are not a visual thinker, and often they have visual processing problems.
So key is figuring out which one of those areas your child fits into, which will help you to know how to address issues.
Well, and the thing is, you can get mixtures of these things, too. But those are definitely, you can get mixtures.
Okay.
But it's very, very variable. But there is a tendency to be good at one thing and bad at something else. That seems to be kind of universal, the uneven skills when you get on the higher end of the spectrum.
Okay, awesome. We had a lot of questions about your mom, your awesome mom. Somebody in particular wanted to know, what do you think your mother would say is the single most important thing she focused on when raising you?
Well, she just focused on, she had a good sense of stretching me. She just knew how hard she could push. Push too hard to get a tantrum, but she was always stretching me just a little bit outside my comfort zone. I'm seeing too many kids that are kind of coddled too much, and they aren't learning how to shop and things like that. Now, obviously, no surprises. Surprises cause panic. It absolutely cannot have sudden surprises.
Okay.
But she kind of just knew just how to kind of stretch me and get me to develop.
Okay, awesome. What an awesome lady your mom is. Somebody else wants to know, do you have strategies that you have found successful in working through emotional highs and emotional lows?
Well, a lot of that's been controlled now with antidepressant medication. When I got to be a teenager, I had a horrible time with constant panic attacks and anxiety, and that is controlled with antidepressant medication.
Okay.
And, I have a lot of information on medication in the Way I See It book and Thinking in Pictures. Oh, there's way too many medications given out to little kids like candy. But for me, a low dose of an antidepressant stops the anxiety.
Okay.
And you've got to use very, very low doses, because if you use too high a dose, you're going to get agitation and insomnia. I've had probably 100 parents say to me, oh, he did just wonderful on a low dose of Prozac, and we doubled it, and it was just horrible.
Okay.
He should have stayed on the low dose.
And we had a lot of questions that came in about medication, those sorts, and people were wanting to know, how do you feel about prescription medications versus homeopathic medications for anxiety, if you have any preference?
Well, I think we need to get rid of all this fighting between the alternative and regular medication. In very young children, I definitely want to avoid heavy-duty drugs with bad side effects, like the antipsychotics, like Risperdal or Abilify. I want to try to avoid those in young kids. Let's do some of the diets first.
Yeah.
Those help a subset of kids. Dairy-free, wheat-free, maybe try some B vitamins and some magnesium. Fish oil supplements have a good effect on the brain. Not eating a ton of sugar, getting plenty of exercise.
Yeah.
Let's do some of those things first. But there are some older kids and adults that are going to need some careful, conservative use of medication. And I recommend that you read Thinking in Pictures and my second edition of my Way I See It book. I also have some information on TempleGrandin.com.
Okay, awesome. I love this question. We had a lot of questions about educating other people about how the autistic brain works, and I'm loving that you've got a whole book about this coming out. The question is how you learn to express the manner of your thought process so that others might understand how you think and thereby help you to understand how neurotypical people think. My child struggles daily with making themselves understood in a neurotypical world, and you seem to have gained an understanding, if not an actual knack for it. And I do think, Temple, I have to say that I think there are so many things about you that are wonderful, but one of the greatest gifts I feel as a parent that you do give us that insight, and you've shown us actually visually how your brain works, and it's so eye-opening. How can we help our other kids to be able to show us how their brain works?
Well, first of all, when I was very young, I didn't know that other people didn't think in pictures.
Right.
And one of the mistakes I made when I wrote Thinking in Pictures was just thinking everybody on the autism spectrum thinks in pictures, which is not true. And then I started, reading more and more stuff and learning more and more things and questioning people about how they think. I realized how my thinking was different. And there's going to be a whole chapter in the new book just on this whole, different ways people think. I find this to be a very fascinating subject, and I've read other self-reports. I have found that, some of the brain research and some of the self-reports were some of the best things that I read. Now, how can you tell if your little kid what kind of mind he has? It usually doesn't show up until 3rd or 4th grade, 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
That is when I did my really good artwork, and my visual thinking showed up as artwork. Things like making a very nice clay horse, for example, and drawing. And you want to encourage the kid to draw lots of other things. If the kid's good at math, that's going to show up, in 3rd or 4th grade. Kid's good at reading, that's going to show up. First of all, what subject is a kid good at? Does a kid like to build with Legos? That's going to be both the visual thinkers and the mathematical thinkers. And then the word kids don't usually care about Legos.
Interesting. Very interesting, because I hear my kid in there. That's a wonderful thing. Okay, we have a question about dealing with when a child is perseverating on something, because, and of course I've lost it on the list here, but a parent who wrote in said when their child perseverates on something that it raises their anxiety. And what advice would you give to the parent about dealing with the child's perseveration? Do they stop it or let it be? And then if they're going to let the child continue to perseverate on something, how do they deal with their own anxiety having to do with it?
Well, what was done with my perseveration, I was allowed to have an hour after lunch where I could spin things. And other times it was not allowed.
Yeah.
Dinner table, not allowed. So I think it's okay to give a child some times in the day where he can do some of this perseveration stuff. And then you have other times in the day where it's not allowed, like church and school and classroom. I think it's just fine when the kid gets home from school. He could have an hour to decompress and calm down and perseverate, maybe even play a video game for an hour. But then after an hour, then I want to stop it.
And then for the parent who's feeling the anxiety when their child is perseverating, any advice on that, Temple?
Well, I would just tell them that if you limit it, not to worry about it.
Okay.
They do these things to calm down. And I think it's best to allow some scheduled time where some of this stuff is allowed, and then other times we don't do it, like at the table, for example.
Right. I love this question. I can't wait to hear your answer. Somebody wrote in, with your ability to see details, do you have any ideas or solutions for how Colorado can conserve or channel our water to be of better use for our crops?
Oh boy, I'd have to do a lot of studying on that. I don't have the knowledge to answer that one. Now, pictures started to come into my head. I started seeing satellite photographs. I started seeing, when I lived in Arizona, the Salt River dams and things. But there's a lot of stuff I don't know enough about that to say anything. Okay,
but I love getting an insight into how you begin to problem solve. Very fascinating.
Well, the first pictures that came into my head were satellite photos that show rivers.
Fascinating. A lot of people interested in your schooling. One person in particular who wrote it and said that they also attended the Hampshire Country School in New Hampshire from 78 to 81. That was the same private school that you attended. They want to know what you
would have been gone by that point.
And they want to know, did you know Miss Adelaide Patey, the director of the school?
Oh, absolutely, I did. Adelaide was there, and then Henry Patey was there. Oh, yes, I knew Adelaide Patey really, really well.
Wonderful. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear that. Lots of questions about finding jobs for kids that are on the spectrum and making sure that it's something that keeps their interest, and in particular about what to do earlier to get a child ready with job skills before they reach the age of 20.
I think we need to start with 13-year-olds. This is the age where kids used to get paper routes, and I know the paper routes are gone now. And if you do have a paper route available, if it's a high-functioning kid, give them a paper route. So let's do other activities outside the home. How about walking dogs? And the thing I like about that is you have to do it every single day, rain or shine. Let's figure out jobs in the neighborhood. How about a tour guide at a little local museum? Some museums will take them at age 12. When they're 16, they can volunteer at an animal shelter. They could work at a farmer's market. They could make PowerPoints for business people. They could fix computers for local businesses. These are things that parents need to just set up in the community with little local businesses to get kids doing things. They've got to learn the discipline of work. And and I think it needs to start at 13.
Wow.
But I also think it's never too late to start. I mean, you might have a 22-year-old that's been sitting around. We've got to get him out of the house, and he's got to start doing things.
Okay.
I talked to some parents the other day. Dad owned a store, and their son had problems with the cash register, an very old-fashioned cash register. I said, Dad, why don't you buy a scanner? Because there's problems there with multitasking. Let's just buy a scanner.
Yeah.
They're not that expensive now. And then the 22-year-old's going to get his butt out of the house, and he's going to learn how to use the scanner, and that's not going to tax multitasking. Because the problem that you have is long strings of verbal information are not remembered, and multitasking can be a real problem.
Absolutely. Got a question from a friend. She says, I have an autistic friend. He's pretty social, but he can't read and doesn't have a job. His parents have a lot of money, and he doesn't need to worry about working. He has certain obsessions like Bigfoot and movie action figures. For the most part, his obsessions are fully supported. He's been on Bigfoot hunts and spends thousands of dollars on action figures every year. I'm just wondering if you feel that it's okay to be following the same interests he's had as a kid, or do you think he should be guided to try to learn and read into more adult areas of his life and pushed to do more things? He's never been...
I think we have to do with fixations is we need to broaden them out. When I was very young, I drew constant horse heads all the time. Mm-hmm. Well, you've got to broaden that out. Okay, let's do the horse's stable. Let's draw a picture of a place where a horse might go. In other words, broaden it out. Okay, Bigfoot hunts. Well, let's learn about, some of the woods and the habitat where Bigfoot lives. Start an interest in botany, maybe. You see how I'm making an associative link. Also, this kid should have been, learning some work skills.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know exactly what his level of functioning is. That's something where I'd have to ask those parents some more questions.
Right.
So I could think of a job that would be appropriate for his level of functioning. But I would definitely try to channel this into something else. And okay, we can go on a Bigfoot expedition, but then let's learn about some of the plants that are in that forest where you went on an expedition.
Okay, so broaden it out. A lot of questions about schooling and recommendations for schooling. Some about, one in particular, my son has Asperger's and he's continually bored in school. Do you recommend homeschooling?
I don't even know how old this child is.
No, I know, and I don't
either. I don't know anything about it. I would have to ask more questions. I was one of the teenagers that had to be taken out of a regular school. Mm-hmm. But if you homeschool a kid, you can't just let them become a recluse in the house.
Right.
They've got to be out. You've got to get lots of activities planned where they're out doing things. And if you're homeschooling high-functioning teenager, I think we need to get him a job outside the home.
Okay, great. I love this one. Any advice you can give someone teaching an autistic child how to ride a horse?
Oh, some kids do just great on a horse, and they oftentimes are a little bit afraid when they get on, but there's some nonverbal kids that said their first words on a horse. And there's something good about the rhythm and balancing. Now, I want to emphasize it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Therapeutic riding is really wonderful for some kids and not appropriate for others. Same thing with service dogs. For some kids, it's absolutely the best thing. But there's other kids that are terrified of dogs because they never know when it's going to bark and hurt their ears.
Right.
So for one child, it's appropriate. For another child, it's not.
Okay. Talking about math, and we talked about algebra a little bit, somebody wrote in and said, my 18-year-old son struggles with algebra too because he can no longer do the math in his head and hates calculators, working on them, but is excellent in chemistry, biology, principles of architecture, and construction. He wants to be a civil engineer. However, I don't know if the math is going to be a struggle and hold him back. Do you have any advice?
Well, I couldn't do algebra, so I basically had to go into the field of industrial design.
Okay.
When you build projects, you have both the industrial design part, the art part, the architecture part, and unfortunately, a lot of universities require algebra. And the only way I got through college was back in '66. The required math class was finite math, which is matrices, probability, and statistics. And I get worried that this algebra requirement is going to block a lot of people. Now, if the problem is doesn't want to use calculators, I'd like to try to figure out some way to get around that. I also find kids that cannot do algebra go to geometry and calculus just fine. There seem to be spotty skills. I've seen situations where the child was passing high-level physics and couldn't graduate from high school. I think one of the ways to get around this is to sign up for a few classes in the college in things you're good at and do so good that you get a professor interested in you, and there can be ways to get around some of these requirements. but he's going to need to go in there and do gorgeous architecture projects or something like that. And then sometimes you can get in the back door. And then I'd want to ask more questions about why the calculus is such a problem. Maybe we get a different kind of calculator.
Okay, interesting. Lots of questions about music. Do you like music? Is music a comfort to you? And do you think music is a beneficial thing to teach individuals on the autism spectrum?
Absolutely, yes. There are some kids that can learn to sing their words before they learn to speak them. Because singing is on different circuits. So, yes, I think music definitely should be introduced to kids. There's some kids where high-pitched sounds are going to hurt the ears, so maybe flute might be a bad idea.
Okay.
There's others that don't like drums. Yes, I definitely, if they really like music, then go with it.
Okay, and do you like music? Do you personally find it relaxing? Do you listen to music?
Yes, I like to listen to some classical. I like Johnny Cash country, and there's certain kinds of pounding rock that I just hate.
Okay.
It's sort of like a, jackhammer on my head, but a lot of music I like.
Do you listen to music in the car when you're driving?
Yes, I do.
And Johnny Cash is your favorite?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite CDs. I also really like Beatles.
Oh, cool. Very, very cool. Another person who writes, I read where you said that before you became verbal, you would get so frustrated you would scream. I have a 7-year-old grandson who is high functioning on the spectrum. He has a speech delay, but is now fully verbal, and in a regular first grade class. His 2.5-year-old brother chatters a lot but says very few real words. However, he does a lot of screaming and grunting. I can tell it is out of frustration. Do you remember what happened when you finally began to speak? Was it the result of speech therapy, or did you just wake up one morning and start talking?
No, I had problems with expressive language, and I had a hard time getting my words out. And you'll see brain scans in the Autistic Brain book that show how I had difficulty getting my words out because the circuits were smaller than normal. And speech problems can be variable. You can have problems with expressive language, problems with hearing, where the hard consonant sound's not heard, or the kid might be echolalic, but he doesn't know what it means. My speech came in slowly, a few stressed words at a time. But I want to emphasize, these things are very variable.
Okay. But I listen to you now, Temple, and you are so expressive, and you are such a brilliant speaker. Is it just that you continued to work and that the people around you just didn't let up and kept working on those skills with you? What do you attribute your success to in this area of verbal communication?
Lots of hard work. You've got to keep learning. When I gave my first talk in graduate school, I panicked and I walked out. And you just get better the more you do it. You just keep learning. It's gradual. There's no single turning point, no single breakthrough.
Okay, absolutely. And I know we have to let you go in a minute. Have we got you for just like 2 more minutes?
Okay.
Okay. I want to know, you talked a little bit about art, and we had many questions, people writing about art, and for kids who already seem to have an ability with art, how much do we want to encourage that with autism? And for children who get frustrated doing art, is it something that we want to keep massaging and have them continue, don't give up on art, have it be a part of their curriculum?
Well, if the child's good at art, I want to develop it, because art's the basics of my design career. Child's good at art, develop it. I wasn't allowed to just do constant horse heads. We're going to have to learn how to draw other things. And if you have a child that absolutely hates art, there's a point where I'm going to back off.
Okay.
Don't pound on the thing that they have difficulty with. Build on the area of strength. Build on the thing the child's good at, with the goal of turning it into a career.
Okay. A question about learning other languages. People wanted to know if you think that's
terrible.
They want to know if you studied Latin.
I never studied Latin, but I got a D in French.
Okay.
But then on the other hand, you've got autistic kids that absolutely excel in language.
Okay.
This is where you get back to the uneven skills.
Right.
Some are going to be super good at this, and others are going to be super bad like me.
Okay, we are out of time, but we appreciate you so much, Temple. You are an inspiration to all of us, and I know you got a lot of things to do to promote your book. Again, it's called The Autistic Brain, and it comes out on the 30th of April.
Yes, and you can pre-order on Amazon now.
Okay, great. So we want everybody to do that. We just absolutely adore you. We hope that once you're done promoting the book that we can have, because I have pages more of questions and pages more of praise that we might have to email to you, because so many people wanted to tell you how much they adore you, how much you've helped them with their children, and individuals who are on the spectrum, how much you've inspired them. So we thank you so much, Temple.
Well, thank you, and I hope I've given some parents and teachers some insights today.
You absolutely have.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of good teachers and people that just worked with me.
Well, we appreciate that, and I think you've given great advice for all of them. And I hope you can dig out from the snow.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome back to Autism Live. So there she was, Temple Grandin. How fabulous is she? And you guys have been writing in how much you enjoyed the segment. I really love it a lot. And a couple of questions came in that we will keep for the next time that we interview Temple, which should be coming up probably in another month. We try to not pester her too much because she's a very busy woman, but she so enjoys being able to answer your questions. She really gets a kick out of it. So that's a big thrill for us as well. And want to remind you that her book, The Autistic Brain, Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson was here last weekend, and Nancy is the executive director of Autism Care and Treatment Today, a wonderful autism charity. They're a 501c3, and so Temple and her publishing company had sent a sizable amount of copies to ACT Today and said, please give these to people who really wouldn't be able to afford the book otherwise, who would really enjoy the book. And we put that offer out to you on Wednesday, and some of you have written in, and your free book will be coming to you soon, but there are still some more copies that have not been claimed. So if you're really wanting the Autistic Brain, and if it's something that's a little outside your means, please write into us on our Facebook or email us and let us know, or you can send it on the live feature. Let us know your name and your address, and we will give them, until we're out, we'll give them an order of who asks. So, it's a great thing, a great, great book, and a great, great opportunity for you to have it for free because we love you and because Temple's people are so generous. And that is coming to you from the Autism Care and Treatment Today people. You do not have to fill out a grant request. Just ask for the book, and they will give them away until they are out of them. So that is Temple's book, The Autistic Brain. And again, if you're watching this recorded, I hope that you will write in more questions. We do keep a file for Temple. And when I called her this last time and I said, Temple, is there any way we can get you back on the show to do another interview? She said, well, I'm doing a lot of press for the book, but I would love to do this before it heats up and gets too busy. I can do it on this day. Have you had a bunch of questions? And I said, yes. And she said, how many? She likes to know, how many people want to know things, because she really loves to be able to answer your questions. So feel free, because then I'll call her again and say, Temple, we have 300 more questions, and she gets excited about that. So keep them coming in, and I will keep them in a separate file. We've had some questions come in throughout the night. Somebody wrote in and said, great interview. The info about typing on the iPad blew me away. I think this is why some autistic kids love iPads so much. Cheers to you. And actually, who wrote that in was Yolanda Baker, and we love Yolanda Baker. Normally, I don't give people's names out, but we love Yolanda Baker. Bite your bills, Yolanda Baker. So if you took Yolanda's advice and you did your extension on your taxes, make sure that you're using her book, Bite Your Bills. You can go to biteyourbills.com to get that book. It so helped me with my taxes this year. And you know what? Not just for this year, but for years to come, because I'm keeping my receipts in a different way and being mindful of things in a different way and making some changes about how we have money here and there, and I haven't yet got it set up, but I'm going to get, Yolanda, if you're watching, I'm going to get an account just for medical expenses at my bank. So wonderful. So glad to have this opportunity with Temple Grandin, and she does pay attention. So we'll have this video up on YouTube in the next couple of days, and you guys can cycle through and look at the time signature. Emily Goodwin did such a good job so that you can cycle through, find the question, and find exactly the time signature that Temple answers the question. Share it with everybody you know, because that's really, you guys watched the last one so much, and that's the reason why Temple was willing to do it again. Okay, it is time. It's past time to go to the A word. This is the wonderful document documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley, as he begins and then really settles into his early intensive behavioral intervention. So take a look. Let's see what's going on with Jack Riley this week. This is the A Word.
You were over this. We did this like 5 months ago. I know, that's you. Hi, look.
Hi, look.
You can say hi.
Hi.
Say, I'm Jack Riley.
I Jack Riley. I got. Well, it's showtime.
It's showtime.
Sit down. I can't eat.
Look what I have. Do you want to play with your rug?
Get the rug.
Whoa, you want to play?
Hard to play.
Okay, then you need to get your stickers. Do you want the rug?
What's the rug?
Okay, you need to sit here. No, you need to sit right here. Sit down. Sit right here. You need to sit here, buddy. No. Or else we have to go sit on the chair, bud. Come on. Sit up. Okay. You're gonna sit on the chair then, dude. Ready? Clap your hands. Good. See, that's one sticker. Touch your head. There it is. You have to sit on chair, There you go. Thank you. You got one sticker for that. High fives. Very good. What do you want after the one sticker? iPhone. Okay. Let's see. Touch your back. Very good. See? You got it. High fives. I'll get it for you, okay? Cool. He's been having a lot of non-compliance lately with the other girls too. So most of our session might be compliance training today. It's basically asking him to do things he already does know, so he's successful. But just to get their focus back, by asking them to do things that they already do know, it kind of shifts their focus back on something else. And then I just bring in what I originally asked was to sit in the chair. And he was able to do it. I don't know if it's just, you know, his baby sister or just, it's just been lately. Okay, my turn. Okay, we're going to get 5 stickers again. What do you want to do?
iPhone.
More iPhone? Okay, sure. Okay, ready? Stand up. Good job. Here's 1 sticker. Clap your hands. Good job. Touch your nose. Where's your nose? Good job. Touch your ears. Nice. 1 more. Sit down. Nice. Very good. Here you go. So I'll do that just a couple times just to get him back in the groove of things. Get back. What are you doing?
Pooping.
You're pooping? Oh, okay. You going potty?
Going to party.
Are you going poo-poo?
I'll go with a party. You're poo-poo.
You have poo-poo in your diaper?
Pooping your diapers.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, are you pooping? Oh, maybe he is. Are you all done? Okay. One more minute to go poop. Yeah. Yeah, and then we're gonna get your dad, okay? Okay, we're gonna go see Daddy. Okay? And go show Daddy to say, Daddy, I pooped. Go find Daddy. She's just doing it. No? Yeah. Yay! You said you pooped and you did!
You pooped, huh?
Yay!
That's really good. I'm really proud of you. Look at me. I'm really proud of you.
You're going to be a star. You're going to be a superstar. She was very fussy until right this second. That's Big Brother's girlfriend.
How are they doing together?
He mostly ignores her. Although he did have a little monologue yesterday where out of the blue he said, "Bless you, Lainey Grace." And then he said a few other things about her too.
I love you, Lainey Grace.
I love you, Lainey Grace.
Oh, that's sweet.
And he'll kiss her head and thinks that's funny because, of course, Mommy gives her big reactions to his kisses. She says, "Ooh, I like that kiss." So he likes to do it like 45 times. But most of the time, if you ask him what his sister's name is or anything about his sister, he pretends like he didn't hear you, which is fine. We're not in a hurry.
Jealousy to work out on, I think.
And we are very careful if he wants me to, whoever's got her, if he tries to get our attention or whatever. If we can, we give it to him. There's going to be plenty of times where we can't. So we're trying not to have her be the reason we have to say no. For now.
Success. It's been an eventful 1 hour since we've been here.
Exciting.
I know.
Jam-packed. This is going to be an exciting episode added. There's baby, there's pooping, there's tantruming, there's everything.
Only the first hour, Suzanne.
I know.
See what the second hour will bring us.
Welcome back to Autism Live. And you know what's interesting to me always watching this wonderful series, The A Word, first of all, seeing that scope, and Emily's showing you where you can watch the entire series because you really want to see that arc of ABA therapy. It's not all hearts and flowers and roses, right? This little boy just had a baby sister. And things are going to change a little bit. Anybody who's ever been in a house where a baby comes in, we know your sleep schedule gets thrown off no matter how old you are, right? And the attention schedule gets thrown off no matter how old you are as well. And we don't all get to throw a tantrum about it. Although, you know, wouldn't you like to sometimes? I can remember when my son was just little, I shed a few tears and said, when am I ever going to sleep again, right? And imagine being a 2-year-old little boy who doesn't really have a reference point for any of this and to understand that it's all going to be okay. We expect to see some behavior. We absolutely do, and we get to see some behavior. But I love to watch how Jessica, how self-possessed she is, and how unemotional her facade is. I'm sure there's stuff going on the inside, although you really can't see it, right? And it's such a reminder to all of us that we come to the table and we have all those emotions, right? And it's very hard to not make them visible in the moment. But you see how productive it is that instead of getting bogged down and trying to discuss it with him and say to a 2-year-old, because believe me, I've tried this before. This is the level of crazy that I am. And maybe you are too. To say, you know, you're just feeling bad because there's a new baby and it's okay. Like that's useful, right? But instead going back to something that he's willing to be compliant about so that he can get reinforced for it, so that he can get back on track. That we don't spend endless amount of time discussing and hashing it out with a child whose receptive language skills aren't ready for it to begin with. And B, even if an adult was upset and you were trying to rationalize with them in the moment, you know, you might get some choice words from an adult, right? It's not productive. And yet we all do it, right? So, but I love getting to see what it looks like. And when a therapist stays unemotional, doesn't get involved in the emotion that the child is having, but gets them back on track very gently, like just picking up that train caboose and going, look at how nice it is when we're on track. And then the train goes, oh, yeah, right, okay, everything, my world is okay, instead of discussing it. I so remember learning and seeing when therapists would watch my son have a complete and total meltdown, and I would be 3 seconds behind him thinking, oh, the world has come to an end, and my child with autism is never going to be able, in the moment, that's what it felt like, right? My child with autism is never going to be able to speak. My life is over. I'm not going to ever be able to get him to see reason, and what will I do? Woe is me. And I'm making fun of myself because basically there's nothing else to do. But in the moment, it was very real. And I felt like, oh gosh, I have no tools, I have no options, I have no choices. And then I would watch the therapist who would just very calmly keep it together, change one little thing, be careful how they interacted with my child so that they didn't feed that emotion, but when there was a pause in it, they would jump in, do something distracting, get him back in compliance, and there they were. And it was not, woe is me, my life is over, there's nothing I can do, I have no choices, I have no place to go, and I have no tools. Fascinating. I learned so much about, you know, even last night there was a moment when my child realized that it was late, and he was not going to get to do all the things that he wanted to do before bedtime because we'd gone to the bookstore, and which was very reinforcing for him, but it meant that he didn't get to do some stuff that he liked to do during bedtime. And there was a little bit of because we've been in STAR testing, today was the last day of it, and he had to go to bed early, and there was a little bit of he got spaghetti legs and threw himself on the floor, and it was just this big emotional outburst. And I chose that moment to not give that attention and was very busy checking out the little crack in my nail and whatever, and waited until he, popped up on the other side of the sofa and said, could I have a cutie before I go to bed? Like, he totally changed and rearranged himself. And I said, yeah, I think, we could arrange it for you to have a cutie before you go. And there we were, and we were off back on track. And I hadn't gotten into the whole, why are you throwing yourself on the floor? You knew when we went to right? Which is what I wanted to do. That was what the instinct was, but I've learned more. So I hope that you're watching the A Word, watching the parents, seeing everything that they do right, and sometimes when they have to learn to tweak something a little different, do something that feels counterintuitive but ends up being so luscious and fabulous that we want to make it intuitive, and watch those therapists as they say, stay in that, neutral place, not having a big reaction to it, because we don't want to feed the behavior. It's really kind of amazing. And you have a wide range throughout the series to look at and compare. Again, you can go to their YouTube page and put in keywords if you want to know about toileting, if you want to know about compliance, put them in. You'll see all the episodes that deal with that. Really is, all kids are different, but it's quite an educational thing, because you can sit and watch it dispassionately and go, oh yeah, no, I see that. I totally get that. I wonder where I'm doing that. Great way to learn. All right, we have to take a break, and then we're going to welcome into the studio Evelyn Gould, a board-certified behavioral analyst, and she's going to be talking with us. I seriously can't talk today. I don't know what it is. Yesterday was the same thing. But she's a board-certified behavioral analyst, and she's going to be talking with us about how we make room. We call it Making Room with Evelyn, making room for the idea that there's more going on than just what we're experiencing emotionally in our gut. There's much more going on, and when we do make room for that, then we get to see possibilities. So stick with us, and we're going to hopefully address some of the questions that you guys have written in. We'll be right back after these messages.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Lisa Ackerman with Taka. My
Hi.
guest here.
I am Jennifer Lucero with Taka.
Taka Mom is here in the house. Jeff saw on a TV commercial, they were making calzones, and he looked at me and goes, Mom, please make me that. Wait a minute, yeah, calzone, you can't have calzone. He goes, well, you make me pizza. Why don't we call it a puzzone? So we're going to do this ode to Jeff, puzzone. So I'm going to have Jen come on in.
All right.
You're in charge.
Ready.
We're going to add a little grapeseed oil, garlic, cut up chicken, finely cut up onion, and we're going to throw a little bit of basil. So we're going to just take about 5 minutes or so, saute up the chicken and all of the onions together. While Jen is slaving away at the stove, I'm going to make the pizza crust. A lot of gluten-free choices that you have out there for pizza crust. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the dry. Again, I'm using eggs. There are a lot of egg replacers on the Taka website. We have about a dozen different ways to replace eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and add my shortening. Calls for a little extra salt, which I'm going to put in here. And also add a little pepper. And we also have herbs de Provence that gives the crust a nice Italian flavor. Can't forget the apple cider vinegar, organic stuff, ready to go. Yes, I have all my ingredients. We're ready to rock with this mixer. And don't be afraid of dough. Dough doesn't bite. So here's what we'll be working with to make the puzzone. I'm ready to go. Let's get this party started. So what we're going to do next is roll out the dough. I like to be rolling in the dough, but we're going to roll out the dough instead. So let's go ahead and get started here with that. So again, you see me using the parchment paper all the time. Love this stuff. It's basically unbleached, ready to go. It's just going to make life a lot easier on your rolling pin. You don't need to coat it or anything, which is a lot easier. But I swear I should buy that by the gross ton. So the pizzones, this basically makes 2 big pizzones. I'm going to take half of the dough and roll it out. Half of the other dough will be for the other pizzone that we're going to make in just a little bit. So you want to do, you're not making a pie crust. You're kind of making a long oval shape. So we're going to try to make a shape where I'm going to basically roll this over with all the yummy fillings. And so any combination or variation thereof. This sauce, just real simple, is organic crushed tomatoes. I've added a little bit of salt and pepper and herbs de Provence in that as well, which I love. I like extra fresh basil. That's always yummy to have on your pizzone. And thank you. This turned out fantastic. So we're just basically building it the way that we want to eat it. Of course, my favorite rice-free, organic, dairy-free, soy-free cheese. It's going to pop off the sides.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of popping out the sides. So that's the beauty of the parchment paper. Once you're done, you just flip it over and peel it back. So I'm just taking a fork now and going around the edges. It looks so pretty.
It looks really nice.
So for 400 degrees, we're going to go for about 25 minutes. You want it golden brown. And because we cooked everything pretty much already, you're not worried about not having everything fully cooked. So look how cute those look.
Looks great.
Like those 4 happy people right there. This weighs a ton. So let's go to the magic oven. Pull out our finished product. And voila!
Good.
Oh my gosh,
looks
this
beautiful.
is so yummy. There's nothing better than a little Jeff Ackerman pizzone. And this is going to be nuclear hot, but we'll go ahead and cut it open so you can. Oh my gosh, this is going to taste so good later on for your kids.
Yum.
Feedback, keep it coming. Thank you for helping, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Come back to Autism Live. We'll keep doing allergy-friendly cooking classes. If you have any suggestions or things that you would like to see us make, bring it on. You can reach us at autismlive@gmail.com or Facebook.
Love the Facebook.
I know, too much for me. Facebook, so facebook.com/autismlive, or thousands of taco recipes ready to go. Basically go to Taco Now, TACANOW.org. And we'll see you next time.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back. I'm just checking out the things that you guys have written, and we also have to welcome to the studio, we have the fabulous Evelyn Gould, BCBA Board Certified Behavioral Analyst. I finally got it out right. So thrilled to have you here. And we call this segment Making Room with Evelyn, but I wanted to do just a little bit of, first of all, welcome.
Right.
It's that kind of day. I'm trying to do 8 things at the same time today. Somebody said to me, I look like a dog with eyes going around in circles. That's where my level of focus is today. But you know, it's where I am. I'm making room for the possibility that that's just where I am today. Okay, so one of you has written in a question overnight about the difference between autism and a sensory processing disorder, that you're already aware that your child has sensory processing issues, but you just don't know what else to look for because you're thinking that they might be on the autism spectrum as well. I want to remind you guys that tomorrow during Ask Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is going to be here, and we are going to take apart, because it's interesting that you would ask this question, because we could go through all the current diagnosis criteria for autism, but since it's changing in a week and a half, and since Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is going to be here tomorrow to really take apart what the new criteria for autism is going to be at the end of next week, I'm going to save your question for tomorrow and ask you to tune in tomorrow to take a look at what all the different criteria for autism, since we're already going to be going over that tomorrow. Also, there was another question that came in about why don't some insurances still cover ABA? This is a very good question. And depending upon where you live, what state you're in, there are different criteria. And even if you have legislative stuff on board that says that insurance has to pay for ABA, you might still be excluded if your plan is self-funded. And there are a lot of people right now that are working on they're drafting a law that's an ERISA law that would address that as well. It's legislation that when it comes out, when it's actually drafted, we're going to get back to you because we're going to be asking for all of you to support it. It will be a huge, huge way for us to further level the playing field. But that is why, if your plan is self-funded, if you're in a state that has insurance coverage and you're still not eligible, it's probably because your plan is self-funded. And then there are some states where they still don't have insurance coverage. So not a level playing field. Our hope was that at the beginning of 2014 that it was going to be a more level playing field, but there's more legislation that has to be passed and some things that happen in the interim that have left a lot of people still in no man's land. Okay. But here's a good one that I wonder if you might be interested in taking on, Evelyn. How do you teach autistic students who complain about doing work in class, like saying that it's too hard, that they're tired, or they use the excuse to go to the restroom? I'm just curious as to whether my son's teacher wrote this in, because I think this fits a lot of our kids. So, our word yesterday was reinforcer, and our word today was preference assessment. So, and I think that that may play a part in this, but I'm curious as to know what you would say. So, when a kid is complaining about doing work in class, they're saying it's too hard, they're tired, or they want to go to the restroom. Any suggestions?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, we need to look at what that behaviour is about. Like, is it reality? Is it too hard for your child? Like, do they need more help, support, prompting? Like, do we need to make it more rewarding? Or is this in a way that they are able to get out of doing something? Like, maybe it works for them. Maybe then people start helping them. They don't really need help, but it helps. Yeah. They get out of having to put in the effort, or maybe it delays having to put in the effort. They have a conversation, they're getting to engage in a conversation or argument with you about whether they should be doing it or not. So we really want to look at what the function of those different behaviors are and why your child is saying these things. Yeah. And then you probably want to approach it in several different ways. So you do want to address the fact that they're saying it's too hard. If it is too hard, then we need to break it down and provide a bit more support. Or if they're trying to escape, figuring out why they're trying to escape from it. And then preventing them from escaping whilst also making it more rewarding. Rewarding, not saying, I want to get out of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think the whole idea of hard is relative, right? Of course it's hard. The too is what concerns me about it. Is it too hard? Well, there's nothing that's too hard if you're willing. But it sounds like there's a willingness issue, right?
Yeah, it could be a combination of both. Like, it might be reality. It might be too hard.
Too hard forever, or too hard for what's on board right now?
It might be that it's too challenging, or they don't have maybe your kid doesn't have the skills to be able to complete the task, and it is actually too hard for them.
Right. But that doesn't mean we give up on it. I guess that's my point, that we back up and do some skills to warm up to it.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that your expectations are appropriate.
Right.
So you're not expecting, the teacher isn't expecting too much of your child given the skills that they have. Yeah. So making sure that what's expected, it matches the skill set. So if your kid is missing some skills that would enable them to do it, and then you go and teach those skills so you know the kid has the ability to do it, and then if they're still saying it's too hard, then it's probably there's probably another function there, that your kid's saying that to get out of doing it, or they've got in a habit of getting out of doing it by saying that, or they're kind of, I guess, for want of a better word, being lazy.
Right.
And they're used to getting a lot of support. And one of the things I have seen quite a bit with we can get into the habit of supporting our kids a lot and supporting them beyond what's needed. And even though our kids now have these wonderful skills, they don't necessarily need as much support from their aide, but their aide is so used to stepping in that they tend to just keep stepping in.
Sure.
And so we don't fade out well. Sometimes.
And this is all throughout life. This isn't just our kids with autism. This is, if I think about me with doing taxes and everything that I could possibly do to avoid doing taxes, right? Whether it's, well, I need to go and I have to go grocery shopping. I have to go grocery, because I do have to go grocery shopping. I don't really have to go right this moment, but if that gets me half an hour out of working on the taxes, woohoo, right? And I will sit and say to my husband, it's just too hard. I just can't do it. It's just too hard because I don't have all the information that I need, right? It's not that I can't do the taxes. I don't have all the information that I need. But I'm voicing and saying it's too hard because I can't actually do it in this moment. I need this stuff beforehand. And I will work like a dog to do anything to avoid it until I can't avoid it anymore.
Right. So there's like lots of different skills there. With our kids in this position, it might be that they individually have the skills in order to do the task, but we need to teach them how to problem solve. So it's kind of like, it's too hard. Okay, so what do you need to do in order to get this task done? Oh, I need to go find out this. I need to ask this person for that information. Maybe I need to figure out a way to solve this problem. And that could be where the skill deficit is. Or it could be that your child doesn't know how to persevere with something. Like sometimes I've come across that where
that's
both ways. Like sometimes you get kids who just keep persevering and don't ask for help, and so we have to teach them how to ask for help. Right. And then on the other flip side, we do get these kids who don't know how to try. Like they don't know how to have a go at something. They just are like, I can't do it.
Right. Interesting. Because then we get into the executive function skills that go with that about, having the perseverance to try something, but when to recognize, when do I need to stop and evaluate, is what I'm doing working, and then shifting to something else, and then continuing persevering. Because if we don't do that, we all see in our lives, we're the fly who keeps batting their head against the screen and then dies on the windowsill when the whole room was behind them. And then and you already mentioned this a little bit, but there's the whole component about what is the reinforcer to get the job done. Because ultimately, that's what gets the taxes done, is that I think to myself, at some point I'm going to be done with this and I don't have to do it anymore. And there's a possibility that I might get some money back.
Right, and then whatever skill deficits you're trying to address, so whatever skills you have to teach your kid in order to get past this barrier, whether it's perseverance, whether it's component skills that are needed to do the task, or whether it's problem solving, in order to teach those things, and you obviously have to think about the reward and the reinforcement that you provide to teach those, and you're going to have to break down the individual skills that are needed and put them all in place. And the rewards are really, really important.
It is. And you know what else is important? And I'm really learning this, that it's so important that we make sure that we pair the task, the skill, and doing the skill with the reinforcement. You had mentioned this last week about how something's happening and we go, oh, that was really good. I'm going to run to the kitchen and find the thing. And by the time we come back, 18 other behaviors happen, and you give it to the child and you have no idea what you reinforced.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And even in life, in our lives, working with adults that are not on the spectrum, we need to make sure that the reinforcement is paired with the thing that happens.
And just being very aware of the reciprocal thing that happens with interactions with our kids. So with this aid, you might not realize it, but you could get in a conversation with the child about whether it's too hard or what do you need help with, and ask for help and this and that, and you have this back and forth that's delaying your kid having to complete the task and getting attention.
Yes.
So there's those things that you need to be aware of, because maybe you need to, if it could be that it's attention maintained and it's, your kid's getting this interaction, so you need to be very aware of that when you're trying to redirect your child back to the task or to do whatever you're trying to teach them to do.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It's tough because you have to take it circumstance by circumstance. And I think, part of the key for me anyway is that I accept in the moment I'm not going to get it right a lot of the time, but I evaluate what I did and go, okay, what could I have done so that maybe the next time I get it more right? That's the only hope for me, because otherwise I could get overwhelmed by it. Or I could spend all my time beating myself up and going, oh man, I stink at this. But I give myself the latitude to say, I just want to be somebody who's getting better at it.
And also give yourself, sort of think about it, Like when you're analysing what just happened, even if you think you did the wrong thing, that's really useful. You're like, oh, I just provided myself with really useful information about what's happening here.
Right.
And now I can look at that and I think what's happening is I'm doing this, this, and this, and he's doing this, and you know, he's getting out of doing this task.
Right.
So think about that as like, this is the useful data that you're collecting rather than doing something wrong. You're looking at it and being like, oh, now I understand this behaviour better.
Right. Right. Because it's not as if we're never going to arrive.
There's no like doing it wrong. It's just what's happening.
And we're never going to arrive. We're never going to be the perfect parent. It's just not going to happen.
Nope.
Our child is never going to be the perfect child.
I'm not going to have a crystal ball.
I'm not going to get a crystal ball, Evelyn.
No.
I keep saying that at some point I think my husband's going to get me one, and I'm going to be able to look at it and know. And I think probably at some point he is going to get me a crystal ball, but guess what? It's not going to tell me what the future says. And that'll be a bummer. But we're not going to be perfect. Our kids are not going to be perfect. I am never going to be the perfect ABA example of a parent.
Well, no, because you're never, you're never working in a vacuum either, and your child's not either. Like, so you're not able to behave completely separately from your kid. Like, you're always going to be interacting with each other, and your behavior affects their behavior, and their behavior is going to affect you. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to happen. So you're never going to completely be able to separate yourself from your kid,
Right. But having said all that, it's really worthwhile to get better at it.
Right.
And that the reinforcer for getting better at it is that my relationship with him gets that much better, and for all of us that's true, and that we get a little bit more calm in dealing with things. They learn a little bit more, and that all adds up to something that's beautiful and precious, and some wonderful. I can attest to that because for how many years that we were working and not getting it right and then getting it more right, and we now are at a place where I go, wow, look at how far we've come. We're not arriving. It's not like that. Train stop, you get to get off now. We haven't arrived, but it's so much better than it used to be.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about the behaviors that they're dealing with right now, and I could honestly say, oh, bless your heart, yes, I have been there, seen that, lived that, did that. And they said, really? Because I look at your child and can't believe that your child ever did that. And I go, yeah, isn't that great? Isn't that just absolutely fabulous? But there was a lot of work between here and there, but it was worthwhile work, and we're still working. So,
I mean, it's that I think it can be helpful to remember that it is an ongoing process, and it's not something that you just do. Just like whenever you see yo-yo dieting, as soon as you stop kind of maintaining that healthy lifestyle, you're going to lapse back in problem behavior, and then you have to come back. So like a healthy lifestyle is something that you're always going to be working at constantly.
Yes. That's not the best example for me this week because I'm not getting that done.
Well,
but I'm trying. I've been there, and I'm going to get back there. I'm working on it.
But you can go. That's the thing. You can always get back.
Yes.
You can always start working at it again. All's not lost.
Yes. Well, I think I've been thinking of it as this big, huge. I think there needs to be a big, huge shift, but it's also that I got to do the little shifts before the big shift, and that's what I think I missed out on. Somebody did. I don't know whether this is a follow-up, a new question, but somebody says, my son gets out of a lot of new experiences by saying he needs to go to the bathroom. It is an escape he has learned that works with new teachers that don't know his method of escape. And, this not all that uncommon, right? Because if you find something that works that people can't argue with, if you say you have to go to the bathroom, what are they going to do to you? They're going to tell you no. I, myself, participated in this as a child. Terrible example, but when it was time to do the dishes every night after the meal was over, and
my grandpa used to do the same thing.
Really?
My mom used to get so annoyed.
And I would stand there, and I this is how clever I was, that I knew that if you did a little dance as a child, that you didn't even have to say I have to go to the bathroom, but my mother would look and say, you need to go to the bathroom. You'd be ordered out to go to the bathroom. So I became the dancer, that I would dance right after dinner, and she would say, you need to go to the bathroom. And then it took my mother like a good solid 2 years. And she had a name for it. She called it the dishpan poops. You have the dishpan poops. You don't really have to go to the bathroom, but you're dancing so that you will get to go and you get out of doing the dishes. So on a certain level, you know, the mom in me goes, clever kid. Clever kid, that your kid got it enough that he or she knows, you said son, that I get out of it if I go to the bathroom. Now, then we have to work backwards and figure out how we can stop this so that he's not cheating himself out of the new experiences. And obviously, you're pretty convinced that it's escape, but we always talk about here, it's important not to assume, right? And maybe you've already had an FBA done, maybe not. But if it were, in fact, and we don't know for sure that it's escape, if it were escape, what are some things that we could do to work on that so that he doesn't get out? What could the new teacher do?
I think that's really hard, because if the first thing I was like, oh, well, all the new teachers need to know, but I think from what this parent seems to be saying is that communication, that doesn't get communicated necessarily to the new teachers, or perhaps this just happens to be somebody who is there for a day or something, or is doing a new activity or something, and they just don't know. Because first of all, I would just say, oh, well, and these teachers just need to be told that this is what happens. Right. And it's hard for me without knowing the child what I would do specifically, but if it was an ongoing issue, you can do things like have bathroom passes is one idea, where your child is given a certain number of passes to go to the bathroom during a certain time period, and once they've used them, then they can't. Right. I mean, I don't want to recommend anything really, because I don't know the kid, and I don't want to, you know, you could, because your kid needs to go to the bathroom when they need to go to the bathroom. Absolutely. And so you have to figure out like what your child's schedule is and what's reasonable for your kid.
And I can say that we just kind of went through a little bit with my son, that there was a diet change, and the teacher, it wasn't a new teacher, but they had started a new skill. You know, it's funny how sometimes like two things happen at once, and you have to look and go, I don't know which one of these things. So they were working on a new skill that my son didn't particularly like, and there'd also been a diet change. And so the diet change had led to him having to go to the bathroom in the morning, and he quickly got, so he had to go to the bathroom, but he realized, when I go, and if I take my sweet time when I go to the bathroom, I miss out on this thing that I don't particularly like. So now we got a problem, right? And he kept going on a regular basis. And so the teacher said to us, what do I do? And because she always comes to us and asks for suggestions of how we'd like it dealt with. And we said, well, let's first of all make sure that we've given him every opportunity before that to eliminate whether it's that actually...
you might ask him to go to the bathroom right prior to doing that activity. So that's also something that this parent could think about.
You could, now we're going to take the break because, and then we're going to come back and do X, Y, and Z, and then the next task is the really difficult one that he didn't want to do. And we had him go to the bathroom right before he left for school because it was happening like 45 minutes into school. And she said, I just get the students all there, and then he's got to go to the bathroom. So we were really reinforcing that, and then we at home decided that we wanted to make that particular task really reinforcing to him. So we gave just a sticker thing for that individual task and said, we want to know how you do with this, and if you get 2 stickers for this, then you get to trade that for, so it was token economy. You get to trade that for this. So we just tried to up the ante on that particular task so that he would want to stick around for it. But that's just, and that's my child, not to say that would work for your child, but just, it's that level of getting creativity, using creativity within the, but I think it's great. We talk about this all the time on the show, that we can't give child-specific advice. It's a disservice to your child. It's a disservice to all children if we say, do this.
But you can apply the general principles of, like we've just discussed, thinking about the antecedents and then behaviors and then the consequences. So thinking about like what's happening prior, and then manipulating what's happening prior. So like in your case, manipulating being like, okay, we're going to make him go to the bathroom right before we know this thing's going to happen, that he's going to ask. So if he asks again, you can say, no, you're not going to the bathroom because we've just been, so you're not creating a problem. Or introducing the rewards, or prepping your kid, or maybe you change it so that he only has a certain amount of breaks. In like the bathroom pass. Or a scheduled breaks. Or sort of the general principles of like manipulating either what's happening beforehand or manipulating what happens after, that stays the same.
And you have to kind of be willing to look at it and go, this may not be the thing, but let's try this. And if it doesn't work, you go, all right, well then we're moving on to this thing. Let's see if this makes it work. It gets into that sort of problem solving. I've realized recently that as an autism parent, you have to get really excited about problem solving, about logic problems and problem solving and thinking outside the box. That has to, at a certain level, get reinforcing to you, or you're constantly going to feel like the victim. But there can be an element of like, woohoo, I figured it out. I love to, I follow a lot of different blogs that autism moms do, and I love when they'll write and go, I figured it out. The mom, I may have told you this story before, the mom who was trying to get her child to not wet the bed in the middle of the night, just forever, and she'd racked her brain and tried everything she possibly could. And then one night came along when something else happened, and they asked the child to get up out of bed, and or she said to him finally, she said, I don't understand. Why don't you get up out of bed when you have to go to the bathroom? And he said, I can. I'm allowed to get out of bed. We have a rule that I can't get out of bed at night. And it was that level of simple, and she was so excited about, here I've been trying all this other stuff, but it was this. I needed to give him permission. Yes, you can get out of bed to go to the bathroom. Then there's the rest of us who have the flip problem of the child who's gone to the bathroom 4 times, but that's where the bedtime, the pass comes in. Just like the bathroom pass, that you can get out of bed a certain number of times and then you're out. And our kids do hoard them for fear that they'll have to get up.
And you're going to have to, I think it is really important to stress you have to do what's going to work for your kid, because with the bathroom passes, that really works well for some kids, but for other kids it might not, and you might, you can get into other issues with the peeing, because we don't want our kids peeing in class, pants, or we don't want them to feel uncomfortable or whatever. We have to figure out what works for your kids. So I think, I like the antecedent, or the sort of working on the things that happen beforehand better, because then you kind of avoid problematic consequences or problematic behaviors after. So if you can figure out that stuff, like rewards especially, like rewarding the behaviors you do want, so rewarding your kid for participating in the things they don't want will really help as well.
Okay. Fabulous. Great advice. We should take a short break, and then we're going to come back, but we don't have a whole lot of time left. So if you have more questions, otherwise we're going to talk about family fun, because that was our topic this week. But if you guys have more questions, write them in right now. We're going to be right back with Evelyn Gould, BCBA. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back. For the month of May, I thought it'd be really neat if we made our own bird feeders. What's cool about it is once it's done and it's hung in your front yard, backyard, balcony, or whatever outdoor area you have, your kids will be able to observe the bird feeder and tap when they see birds coming over and feeding from it. Like, oh my gosh, oh, so exciting. Do you see that? Sorry, I got distracted. I'm just so excited about all the different birds I've been seeing now that I have a bird feeder hanging outside. Anywho, let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are 2.5 cups of birdseed, 1/2 cup of boiling water, 2 packets of unflavored gelatin, a spatula, twine, scissors, wax paper, and cookie cutters. Alright, now that you got your materials, it's super easy. I have my boiling hot 1/2 cup of water, and I'm going to take my 2 packets of unflavored gelatin, and I'm going to pour them in and stir it. The reason I pour it in the water first all by itself is to make sure that the gelatin dilutes really well, and I can stir it up real nicely. Now that it's been all stirred together, I'm going to take this liquid and pour it into the birdseed, making sure to scrape up all the gelatin that we diluted. Now I'm just going to stir it all up. Okay, now that this is all mixed up, I'm going to take my wax paper and put it on my table, just so I don't make a mess. And then I'm going to take my cookie cutter and lay it down. I'm also going to take a piece of string and cut it, about 6 inches long. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the cookie cutter halfway full with our birdseed mixture. And I'm going to take my string, fold it in half, I'm going to place it in the center. This way you can hang this up once it's done and dry. Now that it's full, I'm just gonna pack it in. So now that this is all compacted, it's gonna take about 6 hours for the gelatin to get completely hard. If you take it out too soon, the whole thing's gonna fall apart. So let's wait a little bit and I'll see you guys in a few moments. All right, it's been 6 hours now, so let's see if this little guy worked out. So I'm just gonna pull him up and pop him out, okay? And here's my finished bird feeder. All you have to do now is hang it outside and wait for all the great things you're gonna see. Like, ooh, I see another bird. This is so exciting. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the activity and keep me up to date with all the different birds that you and your child see outside your property. Until next time, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. We have our guest, Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavioral analyst. And our topic this week, and you guys did write in some questions that just came in. I haven't had a second to, there's one about getting ready for a plane ride. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure.
Okay. And again, we're not talking about child-specific because you're going to have to filter it through for your child, but, might talk about some different things. They wrote in and said, I'll be moving to Kentucky in a month. How do I prepare my 7-year-old high-functioning autism daughter about the move as well as the plane ride that will take us there? So it's moving, and we can relate to this because all week long, everyone here in this building has been moving offices, and it's a stressful time.
It is.
It is, and we have to make room for that, right? Mm-hmm. So I imagine some kids do just fine. Other kids have a harder time, but certainly as a parent, we'd be prepared for there to be some challenging behavior, right?
I mean, ideally. And it's not always possible given the fact that you're moving and you're probably really busy as it is and now you're dealing with all your moving stuff. But what I've done in the past with children who have to go on airplanes in particular is to do a lot of role play, and it's the same principle kind of when you're trying to get your kid used to getting a haircut and like doing your best to simulate what it's going to be like for your kid and practicing things and figuring out what are the skills I need to do, what are the things I need to teach my kid, or what are the supports I need in place to help my kid cope with the situation. Yeah. And for some kids it's like getting used to having the lap belt on, and you just have to we figure out a way to practice that. Or for other kids it's like figuring out how to get through the waiting. Like a lot of kids I've worked with have a really hard time with waiting, like just standing in line for a really long period of time, or just sitting still for that long period of time, and then we've had to figure out ways to help them through it, whether it's speaking to the airline. This is something I definitely recommend, is talking to the airline. And seeing if they are willing to accommodate your kid in terms of like, can I keep the iPad on at this time, or can we figure out a way to get us seated first? Because often they'll do things like let you go ahead and get seated first, or get seated last if that's better, and wait till everyone's calmed down, or be at the front of the line. Sometimes it can be quite accommodating depending on who the airline are, and some are more understanding and helpful than others, but I recommend looking into that.
I totally agree with the one little asterisk after it, that because you mentioned talk to the airline, and I think that's really important. Talk to the airline, not the steward, the flight attendant.
No, because they don't usually know anything. Right.
And I would also, just my own little prejudice, I would be careful about words that you use, that you might say, I have a young child who's flying who has never flown before, that we have concerns about how they're going to do it because they have some sensory issues. But be careful, because we know, and if you're talking to somebody and they immediately start using words that you know that they get it, then you can use the A word, the autism word. But we know that there are people out there who do not understand what autism is. And so I would just caution you to be careful about what words you use, because if you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what autism is, you might find, we've had people that have been asked to get off of planes when the kids weren't doing anything that was anything different than any other kid, but it was because they told the flight attendant.
The flight attendants are not the best people to talk to.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, even some airports are really great about, like,
Yes.
if you have time going to the airport, and you can kind of go to the airport prior and have your kid look at what's happening, and I know that there's even a couple of programs where they have simulations.
Yeah, that's cool.
Honestly, they have like simulated airplanes, and you can actually go and the kids can sit on the fake plane, and
that's so awesome.
Practice with the buckles and all that kind of thing.
Do they have the simulated TSA, or maybe you can just ask if you can go through the TSA? Because for me, that's a big sensory issue.
Yeah, so there's those types of things can help your kid. I mean, if you have a high functioning kid, then maybe talking to them about it, reading books, showing pictures of what the airplane looks like. You might be able to find pictures of of what the queue in the going through security is going to look like, and we put the steps, like writing out, we're going to put our things in these boxes, and then we're going to do these things, and walking them through all that type of stuff. That can really help.
Yeah.
And then just really thinking about, what can I do before anything bad happens? Like, not only like, what am I going to do if my kid freaks out and really wants to get off the airplane, but thinking about, like, what can I put in place to try and help get that not to happen.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you're really concerned, then talking to the airline can be really helpful.
Okay, we are almost out of time. So first thing I'm going to say is that we're going to continue talking, but Emily's going to show you some of the ways you can get in contact with us. And I'm going to remind you of a couple of things about tomorrow, that Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is going to be with us tomorrow. And for Ask Dr. Doreen, she's going to be going through the new DSM-5 autism criteria. So that's the criteria for the diagnosis. It's going to change. I believe it's the 22nd of this month. So she's going to go through that, and she's going to be answering your questions about the DSM-5. So that is tomorrow morning. And then in the second half of the show, Claire Lezebnek is going to be with us, and she is one of the co-authors of one of the first 2 books that I ever got on autism, Overcoming Autism. Amazing book. So she'll be with us also tomorrow. But and we also have had a lengthy question come in that we will get to as soon as we possibly can, but it won't be today, obviously. But talking about the airline, you know, it is amazing how helpful they're willing to be when you talk about, be specific about what it is you need. You know, I've heard of people being bumped to first class if somebody said, you know, my child is a little bit, you know, space, being confined makes them anxious, being bumped to first class for that kind of thing. You know, being 100% clear about what you need and why you need it, but specific. You don't have to tell them the whole big long story. And then in terms of moving, you know, telling stories about moving, maybe a book about moving. What do you think?
Yeah, and pictures probably are very helpful. Like pictures, not just of like where you're going, but of the stages of moving. Like,
fabulous.
This is
the
pictures of the boxes, and we're going to put our things in boxes, and this is we're going to get in the car, and we're going to go to the airplane. Just the sequence can really help.
We're like out of time.
You know, get rid of the anxiety.
I'm so sorry. I'm interrupting you, but they're going to cut us off. So more on this. We'll talk about this more in coming shows. But until tomorrow, please give your kiddos a hug from us, and thank you to Evelyn. Bye-bye for now.